If. Born to be alive. So, again, good morning, welcome. A joy to be with you, really. I mean, this is a time that I treasure. It's a time where we can open to something miraculous and beautiful and wonderful within ourselves and see it reflected in one another. This is the great awakening that we're, having a front seat to. This is the beauty of these teachings that we explore on a Sunday morning, that they are designed to awaken it immediately and directly into our awareness and have us recognize that we've been this magic, this miracle the whole time. We just haven't been able to see it because, as we're going to explore today, the way that we think creates cloud cover, and it creates distractions and distortions, and we become so identified with our thinking and feeling processes that we become exiled from the immediacy of our own divine nature, which we never leave. The only reason why we could actually think and emote and feel and act and will and have intention, all of this is being powered from our deeper ground of being. If we were to ever really divorce ourselves from this ground of being, we'd blip out of existence. So this ground of being, God consciousness, whatever you want to call it, Krishna, Shiva, Allah, all of these names point to something that's beyond words and thought. And we're never leaving it. We're always here. But because, like I said, we're identified with littleness, with our little identity center, with all of the thoughts and dreams and weavings that we are endlessly occupied in creating and conjuring, we cover it up. We look away from it. We ignore it. And this is the ignorance, right, that we talk about a lot. This avidya in Sanskrit, which is a very potent word. If you really look at what avidya is saying, it's that not only are we ignoring our divine nature, but we become so connected to these limiting beliefs and disturbing emotions that when it comes time to actually re-entering or knowing again who we really are, there's disturbance, hostility, resistance that can actually begin to be encountered in the awareness. That's what avidya means. Not only are we ignoring our true nature, but as we begin to turn towards it, we begin to feel threatened by it. And the pointing out instruction here is we're not threatened by who we really are. What's really being threatened are the limiting beliefs, disturbing emotions, and stories that we're telling ourselves that are real. Because if we were to go back into the ground of our own being, it would be like this, wild river coming back into the sea and finally stretching out, relaxing and getting quiet. It would be beauty and joy and peace. But what happens is these little ideas and identities will have to literally get washed out, washed away. And so we feel like we're that little identity. And if we were to go home, we would die. And so it's really, the path is a way of coming to sanity, right? It's really a moving from insanity to sanity, or ignorance to knowledge. But if you really look at it as moving from insanity to sanity, you may be more motivated. Because when we're identified as the little identity center, the little self, we're really unaware of who we are, truly. And if we're unaware of who we are, we can't understand anything. We only have indirect ideas and opinions that, as it says in A Course in Miracles, are completely meaningless. And so today we're going to explore this. We're going to explore it through Rumi, through Zen or Chan, Chinese Buddhism, and Sufi teachings from one of the great Sufi masters of our age. And of course, we'll top it all off with A Course in Miracles. So a scrumptious breakfast I've prepared for you. I hope you enjoy it. I did see advertisements. Is it pancake breakfast today after the 10:30? So if you're going to stay later, you can have your pancakes. So anyway, let's get started, and let's get started with entering into the stillness first. How about that? So the first step along the way on this path into our true self is to become completely present with just the awareness of being here now, being in the breath, being aware of awareness. This is where the magic happens. And as it says in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, do you have the patience to allow your dust to settle to the bottom? It's only by allowing all of these thoughts to settle that we can peer into our own dark enigma, the great mystery of our own being. And so just become aware of a distinction here, that you are the witness of what's arising within the field of your awareness. So what's arising are thoughts, memories, images, emotions, bodily sensations. You're witnessing them from a deeper core identity or awareness. What's arising will arise, abide for a little while, and then pass away, disappearing back into the ground of being from whence it came. Don't follow it. Witness it. Stay within the rock-solid awareness, this indestructible, diamond-like awareness that doesn't change. This is where we're going, to this place that we've never left. We need to soak in it this morning and get this fragrance deep in our awareness. And so we'll begin with a very familiar poem from Rumi. Familiar, I think, as it is most loved. And it goes like this. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. So this field, this ground of being, which is non-duality, which is God consciousness, Allah, Yahweh, Prajnaparamita, Tathagata, all of these names are pointing at this non-dual ground that you are right now. And the isness of your own awareness is the isness of everyone's awareness. There's no separation, there's no division, there's no other in this awareness. when we get into our thoughts about it, our commentary about it, our little identity patterns that want to color it in a certain way, then it's my realization, my path, my religion. It's not yours. And then we're popped out of that paradise of non-duality, and we've just taken the fruit of good and evil. Right? That's the archetype here. That tree of the forbidden fruit is where we divorce ourselves and separate from the ground of our being, right? And that ground is calling to us as we're hiding in the garden. Where are you? What happened? And all that's happened is we've identified with a separate self who now thinks apart from the ground and has a whole world and story about it. And so what we have to do on this path is first want to go home. Right? Nothing's going to happen if you don't want to go home. And then secondly, you have to see what's in the way of you getting there. And whatever's in the way becomes valueless in comparison to home. And you get to a state where you want to lie down in that grass with Rumi. You want to go beyond wrongdoing and right-doing views and ideologies. It's exhausting. It's empty. It's like being in a desert. When we're identified with a position in consciousness, I am this, I am not that, we're literally destroying our bliss. The bliss can only come when we know that we are lying down together where there is no other. And so as a result of that, we must see anything that separates us from one another, that kills this all-encompassing field of love in our awareness, must be rejected. We no longer want it, whatever those thoughts are, no matter how valuable we've considered them in the past. One more from Rumi. The mystery does not get clearer by repeating the question, nor is it bought with going to amazing places. Until you've kept your eyes and your wanting still for 50 years, you don't begin to cross over from confusion. So this path, whether it's coming from Rumi or the Chan or Zen masters or Jesus from the Course, it's a stopping, a not doing, an undoing, an unlearning. It's emptying our cup. We know that very familiar Zen story of the intellectual that had all of this book knowledge and all of this worldly experience and wanted to add to that the Zen realization or the enlightenment experience. And he goes to see the great master of his day, and you know this story. He has tea with the master, and the master's pouring the tea, and the scholar's teacup is overflowing, and he says, you're pouring all this tea, my cup's full. And then he says, of course, this is what your mind is, and I cannot pour any Zen realization in a mind that's full. And so to come to this realization is an emptying, a forgetting, a letting go of worldly wisdom and worldly knowledge and worldly experience. Echoed in the famous tenet of Jesus, you must become like little children in order to enter the kingdom of God. You must be born again. You must be like little babies in order to enter this field where there is no two-ness. How else can you get there if you're still being the you that's so full of meaninglessness, that keeps separating itself moment by moment with all of these high-flown ideas or fears or worries or frustrations or wounds and problems? This whole baggage is what's in the way, and that's why this is a quieting down of it. And the beauty is we get to shed everything we're not, and we begin to wake up in the joy of realizing who we've always been. love itself. So in Chinese Zen, there's one of the great teachings. It's titled Faith in Mind, Sin Sin Ming. It's written by the third Chinese patriarch of Zen, Sixan. And there are some things I want to draw from that will, I think, act like great streams of light to awaken this hidden part of ourself this morning, to take us beyond the field of wrongdoing and right doing. I mean, just sit with that first before we take off into this non-dual form of Buddhism. Like, look at how your life is ruled and governed and dominated from when you were wee high by wrongdoing and right doing. First, you had to do the right thing, or maybe, we're old enough now that we got a whack in the tush. Or the teacher, maybe still in those days, would whack you with a ruler. But we were always being trained between these two polar opposites of wrongdoing and right doing. Am I a good boy or a bad boy? Am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? Is this good? Is that evil? And we have all of this duality as the foundation of what we think is true. And in order to get to who we are, we have to let these clouds go. Okay, because a lot of our motivation of living life is we oftentimes identify from one of these two different positions in consciousness. If we didn't like mom and dad and their rules and the teachers and their rules or whatever, we might have identified as the rebel. And we might have wanted to be the iconoclast and the wrongdoer. Or maybe we're the good boy. And we do it always according to what the authority figures tell us to do. And either way, you're domesticated. Either way, you're not your real self. Even the rebel is rebelling against something and identifying with an illusion about himself. So even being a rebel is a fabrication. The real revolution is you go beyond the good and evil and you come back to the tree of life that you are. And that's true freedom. That's true revolution. So along that spirit, Sing Zan. The supreme way is not difficult if only you do not pick and choose, neither love nor hate, and you will clearly understand. All right, so we're going to go through this a little bit carefully. So the supreme way, right, the Tao, remember this is coming from China. The supreme way is not difficult, right? It's the most natural experience that you can have. The problem that we find is that we begin to pick and choose, and we begin to isolate things and name them and separate them off from one another. And what we're doing when we do that is missing the primordial unity, right? Everything's a wave on the ocean kind of an idea. And once we name it, we localize it, and we separate it, and we cut it off from its oceanness, and now it's just a chair or a body. And what we're missing here is that that is everything. The chair is everything. The chair is the universe coming to expression as the chair. It has a functionality, but at the same time, it's made up of the elements that are in the stars, and that it's being held in place by this deeper presence, which is this one universal awareness. So when we can really see this chair as it is, or that body as it is, we would be back in the non-dual vision. We're seeing it, but we're overlaying all of our concepts and all of our meaningless illusions so that what we're really seeing is our conditioned mind, which has been conditioned by right and wrong. We're blind and don't know it, right? So he's saying it's easy to find the supreme way. Just don't get lost in picking and choosing. And then you'll clearly understand. He goes on, he says, be off by a hair, and you are as far apart as heaven from earth. Now, Jesus will say this similarly, and I think in a very profound way, when it comes to forgiving and not forgiving people. Because remember, we're one universal awareness. And everything we're doing as this universal awareness comes from us. That's the other big aha we get when we settle everything down. When our story of being a victim or being wronged, being mistreated, we settle it down. We begin to really clearly see how this was all a self-deception, a way of running cover for a separate self that wants to live. And it will live within its story of victimhood just as easily as it would as the triumphant. So when we settle it all down, we realize this is all coming from me. And so when Jesus says, if you leave one brother out of your forgiveness, you're literally removing yourself from the kingdom of God. You can't enter the kingdom of God without forgiving everyone. If you, he says in this teaching, if you're off by a hair, you are as far apart as heaven from earth. What's the hair? What's the unforgiveness? It's, I exist all alone in my own mind. I am a separate entity. That's being off by a hair. If you're holding to that right now, you're barring yourself from entering the garden. This is why it's an inside job. It's an inner journey. And here's the thing we played with on Thursday night in our Course in Miracles group. That when we identify as the body, like just get present to it right now, you're feeling yourself as the body, right? And where you feel yourself as the body, you're telling yourself, I am this body. And that I am this body is a statement that implies something profound. And that is, God doesn't exist here. Get present to that. When you say, I am this body, I am John, I am Bill, I am this so-and-so, God doesn't exist here. I do. That's being off by a hair. When you identify as that solid me, there's no way to get back to your own ground. So that's why this is an undoing, a relaxing, a quieting, a stilling. If you really still, the solid me is making noise. That's what it does. It's chattering all the time. It's insecure. It's full of anxiety. It needs to reassert itself every moment. When you go quiet, there's no solid me talking. Then you can begin to pick up your radiance and your vastness and your stillness that is everywhere and everyone, beyond limit, beyond good and evil, in a completely different field where there is no other. If you want it to appear, be neither for nor against. For and against, opposing each other. This is the mind's disease. Really important for our day and age, right? Our culture, our society. When you're pigeonholed into a position within your mind, an ideology, a viewpoint that is split off from others that don't think like you or think opposite to you, where you're for something, you are against other things. When you're isolating yourself in such a viewpoint or ideology, you are then again in what he calls the disease of the mind. The mind is sick when it takes up these oppositionary positions. So again, put this into your felt experience in the way that you currently are living your life. Whenever we think we're having troubles and stress and upset and anger, we're oftentimes positioned in I'm for this. I think abortion is wrong. I think abortion is right. Trans people should have values that are shared with all society. Trans people are psychologically... So this is where we pigeonhole ourselves. And if you're for something, you have to then be antagonistic to its opposite. That's a disease. So what do? Well, you look to the media to help you. You rush to your politicians because they have words of medicine that will soothe this dualistic and conflict thinking. So where do you turn? You turn to the ground of your own being. You quiet these opinions. And remember, they're going to come on like gangbusters because we're breathing it in our society. We're around people, family members, co-workers, friends that are espousing these views with great, gusto and fervor. And if we're not careful in protecting our peace, we can easily get swept into the undertow. I know firsthand. But whenever you're for and against things, you're in a diseased mind, right? So the best I can do here is present these ideas. Hopefully you remember some of them if you don't know them already. And when you find yourself getting caught in these bear traps and fowler's nets in this world of ideas and conflict, you begin to go, I'm not going to go into that. That's actually going to cut me off from my peace, my abundance, my joy, my knowing. Right? Without recognizing the mysterious principle, it is useless to practice quietude. So it's useless to practice meditation or calming or stilling if you don't recognize that there's this ground of being, this Buddha nature, this Christ mind, that you are already. You've never left. The radiance of your own awareness right now is it. What is that? Who are you as this radiant, aware being? Discover it. In order to discover it, all that's in the way of it must be rejected. That's why Jesus will say, if you want to find your life, right, your ground of being, you must lose your life. What life? The little solid me, which is always off by a hair. Right? What's the definition of sin in the Bible? It's missing the mark, right? That's what sin is. You're distorting things. Well, the solid me is off by a hair perpetually, compulsively. So the solid me can't help but be a sinner. Do you see the deeper meaning here? So being the solid me is really the esoteric message of the sinner. By freeing yourself from sin means freeing yourself from being an isolated, separated being. Then you can know the one principle that you are. He goes on, the way or the Tao is perfect, like great space, without lack, without excess. Because of grasping and rejecting, you cannot attain it. So it's really this, again, doing nothing, coming to rest, opening up, becoming spacious. Do not pursue conditioned existence. Do not abide in acceptance of emptiness. In oneness and equality, confusion vanishes of itself. So the one principle is the one principle in all things. All things arise from the one principle, abide for a little while, and truly still are the one principle when seen as they are, and then they fall back into the ground of the one principle. Everything is doing that. You're doing that as a physical form. Your mind is doing that with its thoughts. They arise, they abide a little while, and they fall back into the ground. Your emotions are doing that. They arise, abide, fall back into the ground. Everything is doing that, this rhythm of ebb and flow. That's the Tao. And it comes always to rest in the silence, right? And so when we identify with the silence, we're always at rest. And therefore, we're not caught in the confusion of the rising and falling of things. But if we're grasping and clinging, taking some things and getting really attached and getting really put off by other things, we're in the movie. We're not in the ground. And we're going to feel vulnerable. We're going to feel lost. Not because things aren't going our way in life and people aren't doing what they should. We're divorcing ourselves from the ground. That's why we feel unstable and insecure. Not because we don't have as much money as we want in our financial accounts, but because we are off by a hair. So everyone should shave their head as a reminder of this. We can form a cult. Stop activity and return to stillness. And that stillness will be even more active. So this is the beauty of it. So in Zen and Taoism, when you come back to stillness, we're going to look in a minute in another Chan or Zen text that's just profoundly beautiful. This stillness is this always pregnant nothingness or allness or fullness. Right? It's oftentimes referred to as absence with a capital A. The ground of your being is the unborn ground from whence everything is born. So the absence is the stillness, the Shiva. And the arising of the 10,000 things, as it says in the Tao, everything, chairs and lights and bodies and thoughts and emotions, experiences, images, memories, everything you can think of as phenomena, both gross and subtle, are the arisings that come from this absence or ground. And that's referred to as presence. Everything has presence that comes from absence. And what he's saying here is that when you get into the stillness and dissolve your limited view of yourself, you will then be what's called in the Tao, wu wei wu. Right? It's doing, non-doing. Right? You know this statement? Doing, not doing, it's kind of one of those things that got into popular culture. But what it's actually saying when it's talking about wu wei, or not doing, it's not that you go completely limp and passive and resigned. It's actually the ground of being is doing. The Father is doing it. I'm not doing it. This was the Christ revelation. I'm not speaking my own words, he said. What I hear the Father speak, that I speak. I'm not doing my own works. What the Father tells me to do, that's what I do. I'm only presencing the Father. That's wu wei. That's when we no longer are clinging to the solid me. We've gone back into the ground, oneness with the Father. I and the Father are one. And then the Father acts through me. Wu wei. That's happiness. That's power. That's love. It's love at the heart. I'm one with the Father, who is love. The only love. That's me. That's what I am. And so, stop activity and return to stillness, and that stillness will be even more active, more potent, more effective. You'll be acting in the world powerfully, joyfully, enthusiastically, but it will be from an action that goes through you, guided from beyond you. That's your inheritance. And if you hear commentary right now that's trying to comprehend it and think about it, that's also coming from this place of the isolated self. Let that go. Come back to the stillness. I'll just keep reminding us to do that as we keep going. Right? We'll see how this idea of wu, we're saying wu wei, right? Not doing. Absence is doing it. The Father is doing it. We're going to see how this idea of wu, the Japanese word for no or not or absent, comes into play next. Before we leave Sengzan, this is a little pointer at me here. Excessive talking and thinking turn you from harmony with the Tao or the way. Excessive talking and thinking turn you from harmony with the way. Being in harmony with the way is to know you know nothing, to know you are nothing. As Jesus said in the gospel, without me, you can do nothing. So we let go of trying to be somebody. We get still and quiet, and then we are the divine being. If we keep talking from this little self, we're not the divine being. We're this little insignificant character who's highly narcissistic, in love with images, and sees herself or himself everywhere, only hears himself, only thinks about himself, and is trying to get himself enlightened. A failed project, right? But it can go on for lifetimes. Excessive talking and thinking turn you from harmony with the way. Cut off talking and thinking, and there is nowhere you cannot penetrate. You'll be plugged into the field. You will be the field where there is no other, and it's pure knowing. And it will come to you instantly when you need it, and you know it. That's the sahaja samadhi of the jivan mukta. That the liberated being is in this state of knowing when whatever is needing to be known, the next right move, the next step will be presented. You can penetrate everywhere. And then finally here, no need to seek the real, just extinguish your views. Let that sit. No need to seek the real, God, love, divinity. Just extinguish your views. Take care not to seek after your views. Be very careful not to get caught up in what the views are telling you to do and think and say. Watch. Be very watchful of how we get pulled by the nose, by our views. As soon as somebody says something that we're against, or something that we're for, we're in. We go unconscious. We now are those views. Do not abide in dualistic views. Take care not to seek after them. As soon as there is right and wrong, the mind is scattered and lost. Right? That is the forbidden fruit. Good and evil, right and wrong. Take that bite and you're outside of paradise. and you're in chaos. Now where you have to work by the sweat of your brow, and the lady has to give birth with a lot of pain. And there's a lot of inferiority and superiority dynamics, and dominance and submission dynamics. You get it all right there in that little clip in Genesis. Once you take that fruit, you're something other than the divine image. And now the world is the place where you get to play as this other. And what is also being talked about in the Hebrew scriptures that's profound is there's a whole empire of industry that comes to play that will support being the other self. It's Babylon, right? Listen to some Bob Marley. Babylon is the whole world that caters to you being the other self. Keeps you from knowing yourself, but entices you further into not being who you are, seduces you, creates fear, whatever it is, seduction or fear. As long as you're not you, we got you. Right? Become unwilling to do that, and then you're going to make your return journey home. The return journey home is the undoing process that we're talking about. You know, it just comes to mind here. There's that famous, not so famous, but well-known Zen master's epitaph. So he was a great Zen master, and on his tombstone, he wanted it to read, "I spent 40 years down by the river selling water." So in other words, again, we're swimming in this. Just our views are blocking us from knowing it. We're here. What's in the way? Look. And keep coming back to that first principle, which is, remember, the silence isn't nothingness. The silence is God. The silence is love. The silence is joy. So this is the other Zen text I brought with me. It's a collection of koans, and koans are these puzzles that you oftentimes will use to trigger enlightenment, because the koan, it doesn't allow for logical, intellectual thinking. It boggles the mind, and it breaks the mind out of the shell of its cocoon-like thinking. And so this is the great collection of the Wumen Quan. And Wumen Quan means the gateless gate, or the gateless barrier. And there's so much that we can talk about. We can give a whole workshop just on the title. But the gateless gate is basically saying that when we negate this false self, we enter into the pregnant ground of being. And it's everywhere. You know, what inspired this message, to be honest with you, is I had a dream the other night. And I was in a group, and I was talking to the group, and I was explaining how every object is a gateway to Zen. Everything you're looking at can take you into divine presence, because it's literally divine presence manifesting. And it's never separate from its source. And then I went on in the dream to say how when the mind begins to see this all-pervading oneness, it begins to get very nervous, and it begins to chatter to itself as a way of protecting itself from going into the oceanic presence, where all boundaries dissolve, like Rumi tells us, and there's no other. So this word wu is one of those words that have been used in Zen practice for centuries as a way of cutting through the chattering mind, right? And this Wu Men Quan was written by Wu Men, right? So the word Wu is in the name of the author and in the name of the title. And here's a few words from Wu Men. Buddhism calls mind its ancestral nature, its household, and no gate, its Dharma gate. If it's an absent gate, no gate at all, how could anyone pass through it? We've all heard that whatever enters through a courtyard gate can't be the household treasure, and whatever arises from the origin tissue, or the Tao, must be limited to beginning and end, fruition and ruin. But that kind of talk, it's like waves churned up without any wind, like wounds cut deep into healthy flesh. In the search for understanding, what's worse than using a tangle of words? You're just swinging a stick as if you could hit the moon, scratching a boot as if you can itch a foot. How could that ever work? You've got to go beyond words, beyond talk, beyond thought. If you're like the long edge of the Star River or the Milky Way, wielding your lone blade fearlessly, no care for danger and death, you'll enter through the gate with a single slash. Not even the 8-armed demon king could stop you. Heaven's 28 Indian patriarchs and Earth's 6 Chinese patriarchs. You'll leave them all gazing at wind and begging for their lives. But if you hesitate, it's like looking through a window across the room and glimpsing a horse gallop past outside, scarcely seen and already gone, vanishing away. And this is Wu Men's little poem here. The Great Way, or the Tao, is a single absence gate, right? The gate to the Father. Here on 1,000 roads of presence. In other words, the Tao is accessed through all of the presences, everywhere. Dog barking, car horn, water running, a backfire. All of these things can be the gateway into the absence gate of the Father. Once through this gateway, you wander all heaven and earth in a single stride. There's no other. So we'll just do one koan from this. I think you'll love it. This is number 12 in the collection, and it's entitled Crag Called Empty One. David Hinton, who's a great Chinese translator and poet, he's interpreting all of these Chinese names as they really are in English as best as he can. So instead of hearing Master Zhou Shu, you're going to hear the English version of it. So Master Crag, auspicious mountain, magisterial teacher, called out to himself every day, empty one. And he answered himself, exactly. Then he said, awake. Always awake. Exactly. Through all the marvelous days of times to come, refuse the delusions of people. Exactly. Now, Wu Men's comment. one of the things that Wu Men does is he takes these cases or koans and he acknowledges the enlightenment experience that are contained therein, but then he actually critiques it and opens it up even more so that you can't even cling to a residue of opinion. It's wonderful. So here it goes. Old Master Crag Auspicious. He's buying himself and selling himself at once here. He's playing this game with phantom faces and ghost masks, flocks of them. And wise, he turned himself into spirits who've already died and died again, one calling out and one answering, one awake, always awake, and one refusing the delusions of people. Devote yourself to anything as the one and only, and you're lost. Trust yourself to any other, and you're a wild fox full of sly schemes. So you're picking this up. Even the spiritual practice of this master talking to himself, calling himself the empty one, that's a phantom face talking to a ghost. So it gets really, really subtle as we keep silencing. You see, for the busy mind, this will be gobbledygook. But as you begin to really settle and become one-pointed and attuned more and more to this luminous ground, you're going to see that it's always us just talking to ourselves. And those are phantoms and ghosts. Very unsettling for the little self that is afraid of the ocean. Remember, the little self is gripped on being somebody. And as you begin to even look in this direction, it says in other teachings, the whole ground beneath your feet begins to quake because you're getting to the root of the ignorance. You're getting to the root of the suffering. Finally here from Wu Men. Study the Tao and you never know what's absolute. Instead, you cling to those phantoms people have treasured from the outset. The origin of birth and death, immeasurable, outlasting billions of years. Live simple-minded enough and see in it your original self. So, on this notion of giving it all away to enter into the abundance, right? Giving up your views to truly know yourself. We're going to have a little more light shed on us. This is by a book by Bawa Muhayyiddin, a great Sufi master. He passed away in 1986. This is The Map of the Journey to God, Lessons from the School of Grace. Just a wonderful man. So this is what he tells us. Children, while studying this kind of knowledge, it might happen that someone will say, I am a Hindu, and I would throw that away. I would look at it and throw it away. It might cause a little pain to your mind. You might think, he has thrown out the Hindu religion. He has thrown out the gurus. He has thrown out all the Om, Namo, Narayana, the Hare Krishna. He has thrown them all away. Mano, the mind, is the earth world, the world of the 5 elements, creation. I have thrown it away. If I examine a point and it has no value, I throw it away. That, of course, will be inimical to those who are still within it, still within the view, the ideology, the opinions. It will be inimical to them, a turnoff, an upset, an offense. They will say, he has thrown out our religion. He has thrown out our gurus who taught us Om Namo, Sarya, Kriya, and Yogam. But if you examine those things, they are of no use. There is no light in them, capital L. They were worthless, so I threw them away. Muslims say, Ayo, he is opposed to our religion. He is opposed to our race. He has treated our religion without respect. This is what they say. It is not my fault that there is no comparison to that light. This is worthless. I am not an enemy. I am not against them. Everything that appears changes, is born and dies. But you must understand that which is not created. You have to understand the one who creates. I went beyond to the world of wisdom, the world of soul, the kingdom of perfect purity, heaven, the kingdom of God. The kingdom of perfect purity is the world of wisdom. The world of the soul is the world of heaven. It is in the world of God. It is where God dwells. That is the truth. The transcendent knowledge beyond must be learned there. Therefore, I'm only telling you what I have learned. I have been telling you what I know. This is the path that I am studying. You say, this guru said it one way. That guru said it another way. He destroyed a certain Swami. He destroyed that other Swami. He destroyed Kundalini Yoga. He destroyed another kind of yoga. He does not accept this guru, and he does not accept that guru. But I am a student. I am learning. I am not a guru. He was a guru. I am a student. I am studying. During my studies, I examine things and threw them away. As I study, if I come upon a worthless thing, I discard it. What's a worthless thing? Anything that's temporary. Anything that has a shelf life, that is impermanent. Any phenomenon that testifies that you're not the one. Discard it. Everything will still be here, but you'll be illuminated. You're not going to lose the world. It's not going to be destroyed. You're going to lose the clouds of views that are keeping you from knowing what everything is. I am just a student. They are all gurus. I am a student who discards worthless things. If I need something, then it is different. The world can talk, but I will continue to study and learn. A student has to study. This is our work. The world and some people might talk in this manner, but my child, that is why this is a separate kind of study. They will not accept this knowledge in the world. Right? Blue bag must go around. Any views, opinions, thoughts, beliefs, words? Remember that there is this way of approaching this discovery through thoughts and words and questions that you want to open up. You want to discover right? It's very different from closed-minded thoughts. So love to hear whatever you are thinking in that open mind of yours. If you're joining on YouTube or Facebook, you can click the link and donate to the 8 a.m. service there. We greatly appreciate your support. Thank you very much. We bless all offerings and charge them with the intention that they bring light and truth and healing to all minds, that we all may know our origin and source in this ever inseparable love communion. And so it is. Amen. Last chance, last call. Is that a hand or just submission to the one? Both. Let's hear it. Yeah. Get rid of that thought. That's another thought to be rejected, right? So it's an endless coming back to emptying out. When the vessel is empty, like the scholar's cup of tea, when you can empty that cup of even it's not easy, or it's going to take a long time, or I'm not there yet. These are all commentaries by that little self that's always off a hair. So everything it thinks is off a hair, and it's designed to keep you off the mark. You'll always know a thought coming from that little self because it's telling you you're not who you are right now. Empty. Let that go. Yeah, thank you. You just brought more medicine. Anybody else? Alex.
When you mentioned that the divine presence is there in an object, how do you harmonize that with the thought that God did not make this world?
Well, that's our belief. That's what we're imposing upon it. So he actually says, if you're using the Course as a guide, do not think that you made this world. Illusions, yes, but what is in heaven and earth is beyond your making. So in other words, we're going to actually get to what's really here. He actually uses a chair in the workbook lesson to show that when you really see that chair, you'll see that it's connected to the entire purpose of God's universe in awakening the sleeping mind. So that's when it will show up as a reflection or an echo of God. God is in everything I see because God is in my mind. Yeah. All right? Seal the deal. We can rise. We rise as the one, and we settle into this place of no thought and no other, meeting one another here in this beautiful grass where our souls can lay down and always come back to moment by moment, where we know that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us wherever we are. God is. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Beautiful time with you again, as always. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7:15. Love you guys. Thank you so very much.